Okay, perfect.
It's 7:30, right? I said yes.
Yes. Okay, well then it sounds like we're close to having everyone here.
I think we should go ahead and start. It's already 7:31 and we have a quorum.
Perfect. All right.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Our second virtual meeting. Liz, you want to take roll?
Yes. Okay. Committee member Breeding will be joining. Committee member Choi?
Here.
Committee member Cooper?
Here.
Vice Chair Martin? You're muted.
Here.
Oh, perfect. Committee member Peterson?
Here.
Committee member Way, I think is on his way. And Chair Larson.
Here.
All right.
All right. So the minutes from last meeting. Anybody have any comments on the minutes from last meeting? Any comments? No? Looks like no comments. Okay. You have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
Have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor of approving minutes? Do we do this one at a time? Is that what we need to do?
I think for the minutes.
Just everybody say aye.
Oh, well, actually, never mind. I take that back. I probably should do it.
All right. So you want to take the roll call on voting?
Committee member Breeding? We're still waiting. Committee member Choi?
Aye.
Committee member Cooper?
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin?
Aye.
Committee member Peterson?
Aye.
Committee member Way? Joined Chair Larson.
Aye.
Minutes approved.
Okay. Great. So if there's anybody from the public that is on the call, if there's anything that anybody wants to bring up that's not on the agenda, this would be the time to do that. So have it open for public comment.
I do see.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. I know I'm limited to 3 minutes. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jeremiah Pinguello. I'm a local Albany guy. Let's see here. I just want to speak today on behalf of Climate Action Committee. I'm a longshoreman at the Port of Oakland, and I'm actually down here right now at work. And just want to bring up the attention of this thing called shore power. And when these vessels come in, they have about 4 hours to turn off their engines to the ship and connect to what's called shore power. And they get electricity from the shore, from the Port of Oakland, and they're charged by the minute. So that helps reduce all the ship's fuel exhaust while they're sitting here in the bay at port. That way their engine's not running and they have all this smoke coming out the stack, and it's harmful to the air quality for everybody in Oakland and Alameda because the wind blows south. So everybody in Albany is good. The wind from the Port of Oakland never makes it to Albany. It all blows south. So yeah, and then the fuel that they burn in these ships, educational, it's a point of interest. It's bunker fuel. It's what's called raw mineral oil, and it's called fossil fuel, and it's right out of the ground, and it's unfiltered, unrefined, and that's what these ships burn. And you know, we drive cars and they burn gasoline. Gasoline's a lot cleaner. It's refined. And so in this world that we live in, I would say the majority of the air pollution is from these ships around the world. Now, I suggest to you to see a good graph or a good chart. I have an app on my phone, and it's free on the internet. It's called Vessel Finder, VESSEL FINDER. And it's a free app. And I use this all day long. And it's great because you could see where every single ship is in the entire world. It shows all the sailboats. It even shows all the Alameda County ferry boats. So you could even open up this app and you could see where all the ferry boats if you're waiting for one. But I suggest downloading the app and looking at it for free and zooming out in the world. And you could see how many ships there are. And it is so many. And you zoom in Asia or India, and you start zooming in Japan, and you start realizing all these ships are in the water, and you start thinking about the air quality, really where all this, harmful, carbon dioxide is in the air. So it's not just our cars. So I say we push, if you can push to raise a new item for ships and vessels to burn cleaner fuel, it'd be a good thing to work on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Very interesting. Appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Any other public comments?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. All right. We should move on to announcements.
Yes.
Lizzie, take it away.
Share my screen. Can you all see this presentation?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So we'll start off with a quick update on the city's COVID-19 response and status. Without really diving into the numbers of the pandemic, I'll preface by saying that City Hall is still closed to the public, and the city's EOC is still operating and staffed by city staff. However, in the last couple months, things have kind of slowed down compared to at the beginning when there was all this new information and stuff we were learning and responding to. The sustainability staff has actually had more time to shift our focus back towards the projects we were working on before the pandemic hit. So we're really excited to share tonight all the exciting things we've been doing with the subcommittee, and that's a quick update. For sustainability events and resources, I was really excited to put this item back on the agenda because it's been a standing item on the agenda for a very long time, but it disappeared the last couple months. But this month, there have been an uptick in available resources and online activities in the realm of sustainability. In particular, the ones I think I want to highlight are the BayRen program is currently offering up to $6,000 in rebates for home energy improvements, which includes installing electric appliances and doing home envelope upgrades. There's also a $1,000 heat pump water heater incentive for licensed contractors. So any licensed contractors who swap out a fossil fuel burning water heater for an electric heat pump water heater in the Bay Area region can get $1,000 cash back, and that goes directly to the contractor. It's as an incentive for contractors to encourage people to install heat pump water heaters. BayRen is also hosting some exciting webinars about home energy. The first one, which is on July 22nd, is Making a Healthier Home, How to Improve Indoor Air Quality and Comfort. And we did this workshop in person earlier in the year, but now it's offered online to everyone in the BayRen region. So anyone who wasn't able to attend the in-person workshop is encouraged to attend this webinar. And then the second webinar is The Future is Electric, How to Eliminate Fossil Fuels from Your Home, which is on the 28th. And then another resource I'd like to note is that Stop Waste has really been adding to their gardening resources, knowing that many people who are at home during the shelter-in-place order are paying a lot more attention to their garden. And they're trying to combine providing resources for gardening with education on how compost and gardening and growing your own food and composting your food scraps can combat climate change. The next update East Bay Community Energy has the board of EBCE recently made a decision to adjust EBCE's budget for next fiscal year. And I'm going to dive in just a little bit about what the board has decided and then future decisions that are to come. And I'll note that we don't need to take any action tonight on this item, but this is a conversation we will continue to have over the next few months. So we just wanted to give you some background information about it today. On June 17th, the EBCE board met to make a decision on next year's budget. That decision was to reduce the discount on the Bright Choice product, which is their lowest tier clean energy content and price product. It's like the first in the set of tiers. So the Bright Choice rates have always been 1.5% lower than PG&E's rates, but next fiscal year, Bright Choice will be 1% lower than PG&E's rates. That took effect on July 1st, 2020. The one that's particularly important for Albany is the price and power content of the Brilliant 100 product will be discussed by the EBCE board in the fall. The Brilliant 100 product is the product that is Albany's default electricity product. So in November of 2018, all Albany commercial, residential, and municipal accounts were automatically enrolled in Brilliant 100, which is the 100% carbon-free energy that's provided at the same rate as PG&E. But the board or EBCE staff has explained that the cost of procuring the energy for the Brilliant 100 product is not on par with the income that it brings in. So I guess the product is a money-losing product. So they said it's not sustainable to keep that product. The future of the Brilliant 100 product has not been decided by the board yet. There are a few options on the table, but it is very likely that Brilliant 100, as it is right now, will no longer be at the end of the year. The proposals right now on the table are that Brilliant 100 the price of Brilliant 100 will raise from on par with PG&E to 2.5% or 3% more expensive than PG&E's. Brilliant 100 might be rebranded. It might go away. The board has made no decisions on that yet, but those discussions will start happening in the fall, and we wanted to bring it to the CAC's attention today because that's a decision our city council will have to make, and the CAC will probably want to have a discussion about what we think is best or what direction what direction the CAC wants to go. And also the last notable piece of the budget is that EBCE will be maintaining the rate of Renewable 100 at 1 penny per kilowatt hour more than PG&E's rates. So the rate changes to Bright Choice and Brilliant 100 will take effect, but Renewable 100 will remain unchanged. My notes to make sure I'm not missing anything here. A couple other things to note is as of July 1st, no new customers are allowed to enroll in Brilliant 100. So the Brilliant 100 product is capped so that anyone who is currently enrolled in Brilliant 100 will remain in Brilliant 100 at the same price and same renewable content through the end of the year. But at the end of the year, that will likely change. That was a lot of information, but I hope it made sense. I can take questions if anyone has any. Okay.
I do.
Uh-huh.
First up, I tried to use the Q&A button to raise my hand, but it didn't work.
Oh, just physically raise your hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much time will the city have between when EBCE makes a decision and the city will have to make a decision?
We've been told by EBCE staff that they were going to proactively work with us to tell us what the timeline is, so that we have ample time to have those discussions before the end of the year when the projects are automatically shifted. But I don't have a more specific timeline than that right now, but more information should be coming soon.
Okay, thank you.
Just to reiterate what Lizzie said and build upon it. What I was told by EBCE is that in September is the earliest they would even begin these discussions. So there's a little bit of time. And Albany and Hayward have, a lot of interest in this particular topic because it's our default, Brilliant 100 is our default product, but most municipalities have Brilliant 100 as their municipal product at least. And so many cities are going to have to make this decision. And so EBCE is aware that the time will be needed for that.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, do you have yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so this is huge, just because, that was part of us meeting our reduction in carbon was going with 100% carbon free. That was a big deal. And it also underpins our entire push to go with electrification. So I think I want to just impress on all the other Climate Action Committee members that this is huge. So Eric, could you mute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
So one thing I want to look at right away is first find out when the city council needs to make a decision with the city council, and we went through this with the UUT, is there super adverse to anything that's going to, and they, the current council, which of course will only be through the end of the year.
I think, Nick, you're cutting out a bit.
I could be making the of them there. Sorry.
Yeah, we lost you.
Your audio is
hear me?
cutting out a bit. It's a little choppy.
Yeah, well, I notice it's cutting in and out with other people too. So
Yeah, so we talking about the city council changing over at the end of this year.
yeah, all I'm saying is we should make a position. I would suggest our position should be, if anything, the default should then change to 100% sustainable, because otherwise we're going to roll down to a less than 100% carbon option, which is going to be very negative.
Right. So Lizzie suggested putting this on the agenda for tonight as a notification. So it's the earliest information that we have. So that's a good thing. But of course, yeah, it's I totally agree, Nick. It's a part of our plan, and we need to prepare for it. So now, as more information comes in the next months, then we'll be we'll definitely have to act and figure out what we want to propose. So totally agree.
Yeah.
But I guess my concern is if this is going to happen the first of the year, and the city council has to make a decision before, which means in December, and then we only have September, October, November to work on this or come up with something. So I think we need to ask Dan Lieberman to come in and really explain this ASAP.
Yeah, and we'll continue to monitor the situation and report back any information we hear. Okay, I'll hand it over to Claire for an update on the UUT.
Yeah, another big announcement here. The City Council approved a tax measure for the November ballot that increases some utility users' taxes a couple weeks ago. I guess it was the Monday before last. Much, but not of all of the final approved ballot language aligns directly with the Climate Action Committee's recommendation to Council that you made in May. The proposed measure would leave the telecommunications tax at 6.5%, increase the electricity tax from 7% to 9.5%, as well as the natural gas tax, and apply a new 7.5% tax on water. That aligns with the ACAC proposal that the Climate Action Committee recommended to Council at your last meeting. It also exempts a self generation of electricity and low income customers and it recommends 1/3 of revenue for climate protection be used for climate protection. The council did not approve the suggestion of increasing the natural gas tax over time, but they also didn't rule it out in the future. So it could be, again, taken up in 2 years from now as an option. And because of that, in the climate action plan, the UUT item is about working with PG&E to get their billing system to allow for this. And so staff are still committed to working with PG&E to work on that in the meantime. Despite the fact that they didn't take up that last piece, we see this as really exciting news. The CAP has a potential dedicated funding source now. So staff plans to analyze costs for CAP implementation and make suggestions for how this potential revenue could be used once it's available, based on the conversation we had at your last meeting and recommendations on the types of things we would fund, including incentive programs as probably the largest piece of that, but also some capital improvements as well. It's important to note that this is a general tax, so it's not guaranteed that the CAP funding will be allocated from this pool, but it is likely to be prioritized for CAP funding, at least 1/3 of it, after the budget impacts from COVID have been worked out and the economy is back on track. So there may be some lag time depending on where the city budget is, but the thought is this is a likely source of CAP funding moving forward once that's worked through. I believe the ACAC is considering supporting the measure, but I'll defer to Committee Member Peterson on that point. And if the committee is interested in campaigning for a measure like this, I suggest getting involved through the ACAC platform is probably the most appropriate way to do that. But I just want to make sure you're all careful to not violate Brown Act restrictions, and make sure that if there are more than 3 of you working together on this, that you don't work together, work separately, even if it's something that the committee as a whole has recommended. So that's just a little reminder. That's the update. I don't know if there are any questions about the council action, and Committee Member Peterson may have more to add because he was involved in this process.
Did you want to say anything, Nick?
Yeah, if I can get myself unmuted.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so just to bring you up to date on that, ACAC worked very hard on this. I think there were a series of 3 city council meetings where we lobbied very strongly, wrote quite a few letters that were very detailed, explained this thing quite thoroughly. And I think at first, when it passed, we were we actually got it to this position where everything was going to go through, and all that the city council needed was a recommendation on the cap of the gas tax. And then when we started up again, Councilmember McQuaid completely flipped back to the beginning, and Barnes jumped on that with attempting to undermine the whole thing. So actually what we were able to do was, luckily Pilch and Maz held strong, and then we did get everything except for the raising gas tax. And I think you're totally right, Claire. Probably by the time PG&E even gets this through to where we can have a raising gas tax, it's going to be a couple years down the road, and hopefully by then we'll have. Sorry about the noise in the background. I've got people watching TV. Hopefully we'll get we'll have that all in place, and we'll have a more sympathetic council. But it was really telling for me to see how, just with something like this that is so clearly what we want to do, if we don't have a council behind it, we're not going to get anywhere. So with only the 2 members, it was a little tough, but we were able to get it through. And thanks to McQuaid, she saw at least a wiseness in having the higher rates on gas and electricity and lower on water and communications. So ACAC has now endorsed this, and we'll be lobbying, we'll be assisting with, and that's in fact our next big effort, is to assist in supporting this when it's on the ballot.
Max, did you have a comment?
Just wanted to thank the ACAC and Nick and Preston in particular, but all the members to support this measure, because it does represent progress in some form, since I think we've been pursuing this for, I think, 3 or 4 election cycles. So each time it's moved forward a bit further. Just a follow-up question, Nick, can you just describe again the opposition to the natural gas increase? Was there something specific, or just something for us to be aware of, for just maybe?
Yeah, this totally comes from Barnes, McQuaid, and Nason. Nason is against any tax at all, period. She voted no on everything. And her argument is that Albany doesn't have an official budget, and we have no idea how we're spending our money currently, just because everything's changing and it should all be worked out to the more modern or the more current situation before we impose more new taxes. I can kind of understand that, but climate change isn't going away and we still need this UUT. Barnes wasn't going to vote for any large double-digit tax increase, period. That was, as he quoted, a showstopper. He also went on to say, anything Albany does is pissing in the ocean, and there's no point in doing it at all. So he's a complete lost cause. And then McQuaid seemed to think that Albany voters aren't very able to understand varying tax rates. And so it was too confusing. She was very much more convinced we should just have 8% across the board everywhere, just so everyone wouldn't be confused. And even though we addressed that numerous times, especially Preston sort of outlined all sorts of things about equity and this and that, and what we're really trying to do, and how we're actually leading other communities and bringing this about, putting the pressure on PG&E. All those fell to naught. So it's really important to me. This really brought home that you need dedicated, far-thinking council members that clearly understand what we're up against here and aren't prone to just knee-jerk reactions.
I think I saw Jeremiah had a comment or a question.
Yeah, Jeremiah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was in the city council meetings and I had my public comment. And my suggestion was, since this is the Climate Action Committee, regarding global warming and everything, my idea was to raise the gas tax to de-incentive people using gas, because that's not helping the climate if you're using gas. And so my idea was raise the gas tax a little bit, and then also lower the electric tax to give people an incentive if they have solar panels on their house, and it encourages people to go out and get solar panels, because they're getting a little less tax, they're getting a tax break. So it's cheaper to go electric. So that encourages people to go electric, which helps the climate and helps global warming, which is a good thing. And then last but not least was raise the water tax a little bit, just to help people keep in mind, just to conserve, because I feel we are in a drought, so anyway, just raise the tax for water just a little bit, just to help people keep in mind, just to conserve water, and we're in a drought. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Nick, do you want to give him the 2-minute reason why the gas tax and the electric are the same?
Actually, I applaud Jeremiah. I mean,
absolutely.
Jeremiah's
right on track.
It totally shows that the citizens of Albany, they clearly understand this. They see the incentive measures. Jeremiah, that's exactly what we'd like to do. There's a big hurdle in that the taxes are collected by PG&E, and PG&E's accounting system, according to PG&E, cannot accommodate different rates between gas and electric. And there needs to be about $1 million change to their accounting system in order to bring this about. And we've been bringing this up and dealing with PG&E, and it's been fighting it off and getting other municipalities to want this at the same time. Then the cost can be shared amongst all municipalities, and we can just get past this hurdle and do it, because that's exactly what we need. Is we need to put more tax on gas, less tax on electricity. So we wanted to at least get that into the measure so that it would be there when this was put in place, which will probably take a couple of years. But at this point, we don't have that. So in another 2 years, when hopefully we have a better city council, we can then do exactly what you suggested and start to implement higher rates on gas and maybe even lower rates on electrical. But I very much appreciate your comments on that.
Absolutely. Thanks. All right. Any other comments or questions on that? We can move on to the agenda.
Real quick, I'm going to give the mic to Allison Martin. She has an announcement.
Okay.
As Lizzie knows, I'm going to be attending Harvey Mudd College in the fall, and I'm very excited to go. And they actually are going to try a modified in-person model, which is going to mean that students are going to be on campus, but taking most of their classes online. So I will not be living in Albany anymore as of late August. So this is my last Climate Action Committee meeting. And I've had a wonderful time being on the council with you guys and seeing the amazing work that the committee has gotten done and what all of your guys' passion for making Albany more sustainable and doing what we can to stop, and also setting a really good example for other cities who can hopefully compound the impacts and make a big and noticeable and really helpful change. Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on the committee and doing all of your wonderful work. And I hope to see you guys again, maybe around Albany when I come back. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Allison.
Congratulations.
Really appreciate having you on the committee. Good luck at school.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That concludes the announcement.
Good luck.
You've got the green building update next, right?
Yes.
Who is...
Let me go ahead and share my screen for you guys. Okay, can you guys all see that? You guys can see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Hey everyone. So today I'm going to be giving you just a short update on the feedback and suggestions on the green building proposal that I presented in the last meeting, because I went and then we talked to staff as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So just giving you an update on that. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to quickly talk about natural gas ban updates as well. So lots of updates today. We had 3 cities who have a little bit of movement on natural gas bans that just wanted to let you know about. San Jose last fall had banned gas for low-rise residential buildings for new construction. And they're currently drafting an ordinance that would ban gas for all new construction, with some exemptions carved out for restaurants, hospitals, industrial, and manufacturing. So pretty wide-ranging gas ban that's probably going to be passed in the next few months. San Francisco had in January banned gas for their new municipal buildings. And they had a supervisor who just in June introduced a bill that would ban gas for all new buildings, including some major retrofits as well, with some narrow feasibility exceptions, and possibly a carve out for a year or two that would exempt commercial kitchens. So those are the 2 kind of big news items in terms of natural gas bans. Berkeley is still going through their lawsuit with the Restaurant Association. They recently had a hearing, I think just yesterday, and it didn't really move the needle very far. They're basically getting more information, and it'll be several more months until there's any sort of ruling coming out of that. So with that said, go ahead and talk about the suggested modifications that staff brought up. Staff generally is recommending almost the exact same proposal that I presented to you guys last meeting, with just 3 changes. The first one being about the electric panel requirement. This was the requirement that would mean that whenever an electrical panel is upgraded, it would have to be upgraded to a 200 amp panel. So staff is recommending taking that measure off of the proposal for a variety of reasons, in large part because it's a sort of one size fits all measure, but the different houses have different needs in Albany. So for instance, there are some homes that are very small, and even when they're fully electrified, they might not need 200 amps. Others might need much more than that. And some small houses can't even fit a 200 amp panel without, some major modifications. And then there's also an issue of cost there. So in some cases, upgrading to a 200 amp panel might cost a few $100s extra. But in other cases, PG&E would have to install a new drop line, which could cost several thousands of dollars. So that's a pretty major added cost for renovations, which in some cases are, really about safety, fire hazards, and they're not equally distributed across different renovations projects. So those are some concerns from staff, and they recommend pursuing that as a separate measure, more through incentives and sort of, dealing with electric panels on more of a case-by-case basis. Number 2 is permeable paving. So this was the measure that would require permeable paving to be 30% of the paved area for a home or any other residence. And this measure isn't necessarily problematic. It just would have a pretty limited impact in Albany because we have clay soils here. And so that permeable paving wouldn't really reduce runoff all that much. So, it wouldn't have the kind of major impact we'd be hoping for. And it really wouldn't be a good substitute for a drainage plan. It wouldn't solve the drainage issue. And so it just didn't seem like maybe a super necessary thing to require because it's not really creating that much of a benefit. And, it's not really solving any problems. And it's also not a climate oriented measure. It's more of a water issue. So it's not one of our top priorities also. And then finally, is the question of ADUs. So this is something we didn't talk about specifically in the proposal, but staff recommends adding ADUs into that proposal, and basically just specifically saying which of the measures would apply to them. So what makes the most sense here is for ADUs to have the same requirements as single family homes, just excluding the energy efficiency requirements. So that would mean the Energy Star appliances, low flow faucets, low carbon concrete, reduced outdoor lighting, and low VOC resilient flooring. So all of those measures, but not any of the solar panel or increased energy efficiency measures. We can't actually require those at the moment due to the CEC. It doesn't have any cost effectiveness studies on ADUs, so we can't require anything in that realm for ADUs at the moment. And of course, we're also generally trying to keep the cost for ADUs very low. So it would just be those low cost kind of minor measures that would apply to the ADUs. So those are the suggested modifications from staff to the proposal. And then we have feedback from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Overall, the Planning and Zoning Commission was very supportive of this proposal. There was one member of the commission who was not. He was concerned about any sort of added cost to construction whatsoever. But all of the other members were very supportive. The main sort of comment that they had was that they really wanted to make sure that the costs for renovations stayed low. They weren't so concerned about increased costs for new construction, especially if it's, creating incentives for electric construction. I just want to make sure that people who are trying to renovate their houses aren't having huge added costs. But they were pretty comfortable with the way the proposal was built because it does a pretty good job of making sure that those renovation measures are very low cost. And they just mentioned putting in some exemptions for economic hardship or infeasibility, just to create some wiggle room on the sides. And the commission chair also mentioned that if the electric panel requirement does get into that final proposal, that there should be economic hardship or other exemptions for that, because that would create potentially a pretty significant cost for a renovation. So that was their main concern. But again, overall very supportive. And so with that, the next steps here would basically be for you all to discuss this feedback and decide on a final proposal to recommend to the council. And we'll also go ahead and get the Planning and Zoning Commission to make a formal recommendation, either of the same proposal you have, or they might edit it in some ways, potentially. And then we would bring that proposal to council in the fall. And if approved, we'll apply to CEC for approval for the energy efficiency measures. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Yeah. We had two participants from the public, Jeremiah and Preston, raise their hand. I forget, it's been a while. Do we do public first and then us, or us first and then public?
Sorry, go ahead.
Typically, committee members who have questions ask their questions for staff, and then before it gets into discussion, it goes to questions and comments from the public.
Thanks.
So questions, public comment, discussion.
Committee members, any questions for Michelle? Tom?
Michelle, so this is a little different than what we talked about last. I know there were some email communications. Are you saying that the Planning and Zoning Commission approved, except for one person on the commission, for what you laid out, those changes?
Yeah, so I brought to them, basically I talked to them about the proposal that I brought to you guys last time, and discussed with them the panels and paving and ADUs, and kind of said that this was I told them about the fact that this was the staff suggestion to take it out, but it was in the original proposal. So we kind of discussed all of that. They didn't have super strong feelings about either of those issues. We did have one member that really wanted to make sure that the ADUs were included. And then, like I said, the council chair was concerned about making sure there were exemptions if you do choose to include the electrical panels.
Right, and also the other point was that we had discussed requiring it to be 100% electric, and you found out that we couldn't do that, right? That's part of this too. We couldn't require that with an ADU.
Oh yes, yeah, right.
Because that was one of our recommendations as well.
Yes, I think we talked about that and figured out that we couldn't require that at this time. So we didn't bring that up with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So they didn't support the solar panel requirement
for ADUs?
Because of the cost for the ADUs?
That I don't think that was ever on the table, because we can't require due to the CEC's rules at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Sorry, hang on. Any other comments from the committee?
Looks like Member Peterson.
Sorry, I got myself out of. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a little concerned about how the analysis of the panel changed. So we're headed towards 100% electrification. If people don't do it when it's most convenient to install a panel, they're going to incur huge costs later when they have to come back and then after the fact try to upgrade their service whenever. I've gone through a service upgrade. Yes, it's a cost. If you're doing a major remodel, though, it kind of diminishes compared to, we got $500 to $600 square foot construction costs going on. And it's really, when you're doing that kind of major construction, that's the time you should do it. So I see a lot of hand wringing. I mean, I don't want to impose costs on people that aren't necessary or that are frivolous, but this is a very serious one. This is like a sewer lateral upgrade. If people are allowed to just circumvent electrification, then every remodel that comes along, it just builds in that we're going to have to hit them later with an even more expensive cost. So I think when you say, oh, these are expensive because they're thousands of dollars, additions cost hundreds of thousands upwards to millions of dollars. So these costs become relatively not that big a deal. I mean, we can certainly say, oh, you should do this, and it is required, but if they're extenuating circumstances, we do that. But just to throw the whole thing out, I think is not the way to approach it. So I'm really concerned about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think we can get into the discussion probably later on, but yeah, just in terms of, clarifying the staff's kind of perspective on, I think there were concerns about, there are definitely homes in Albany where it's a safety issue and, they're just doing the panel upgrade. It's not part of a different remodel. And so they're trying to keep costs really low. And then there were also questions about the sort of efficacy of using this to make future electrification easier. Because, there's some questions as to, for future electrification, do we really need 200 amps? Will that requirement be lower in 10 years or something? Will it be higher for some houses and lower for others? So, yeah, there are a variety of questions about that that staff brought up. But, we can definitely, I think it's good to kind of talk through all that in the discussion portion.
Any other questions? Take questions from Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, go ahead.
Hi. So what if the power goes out, right? And so PG&E doesn't work. I would bring this up to those committee, the ARC. It should be off grid. I would suggest off grid. Just because you can't require everybody to do this, it doesn't mean we shouldn't suggest it. Because the right thing to do is to encourage people to go solar and 100%, and give them an option to where their ADU is off grid. If it could be off grid, so if PG&E shuts down and something happens to a blackout or a brownout, the house, they could go in their backyard and switch on the emergency power supply because they got a battery bank and they got solar panels and they can still survive. They can still survive. So we should encourage people to build off grid and we should include those conditions for ADU in your little chart there. If you could recommend, we should include it, even though we can't require people to do it. It would be a good incentive to at least suggest it. And then maybe we could do a fundraiser. They could offer grants to get solar panels at that cost, because the state always gives away solar panels. I'm sure, hypothetically, Tesla's going to be giving away solar panels in a couple of years. So everybody's going to get free solar panels. So just let that be an option for people if they want it off grid and ADU. That way PG&E doesn't control everybody. That way things aren't controlled by the government or some communist society. People still have freedom to have a choice. People still have a freedom to have an ADU in their own backyard that they own, and they should have freedom to collect rainwater if they want. Collect rainwater and filter it with gravel, wherever makes them happy, so they can live a permaculture life. So just encourage people to live a healthy, in their backyard. Thank you.
Thanks. Preston, you had a comment or a question?
Hi there, committee staff. Interesting item, thank you. I noticed in the staff report that there's apparently an EVCE has a model code that I think the staff report said is, basically could be adopted on a turn, essentially, very quickly, that regards electrical panel upgrades. I guess one, am I understanding that correctly? And two, is that would presumably be a separate track from going through the green building code requirements? And does that code have the nuance that staff thinks is appropriate, given the concerns about one size fits all? That's sort of one set of questions, and potentially leading to a suggestion that the panels aren't off the table. There's just a different way to get it done that makes for a better fit. And then the other is on the permeable pavement. So I will have to drop my professional credentials on this one. I'm a certified hydrogeologist, and so I observe soils around Albany, what happens with precipitation. We actually direct most of our roof drainage into a swale in our yard. So I've been able to measure the infiltration rate from that, and it's about a foot a day of water. And these are typical Albany soils. So yes, they're not, sand or sandy silt, but they're not impermeable either. And I would just ask you to think about, when you walk around town in a heavy rain, do you see water pouring off of the dirt portion of people's yards? And I certainly don't tend to observe that. I mean, obviously, in a very, very, 99th percentile type event, but otherwise it's pretty much infiltrating. So I'm not in favor of getting up the permeable pavement option. I think it also is supportive of the urban forestry element. We haven't had to turn on the water in our yard this year because we infiltrate so much water in our yard. Now we don't have grass, but we've got lots of native vegetation, and it's all doing great. And some fruit trees and whatnot. And if we want to support the urban canopy, I think it's important to get more water in the ground in the wintertime to help them out through the summer. Thanks very much for considering my thoughts and questions, and for your work.
Thanks, Preston.
Thanks, Preston. I can talk about the EBCE recommendation quickly, because he asked about that. The electrical panel measure was from that EBCE I forget what the name of it was. Maybe Claire, you remember?
I don't know. Was it a model ordinance?
Yeah, it was a model ordinance. That's what I'm thinking of. Thank you. Yes, it was from EBCE, a model ordinance. And yeah, it wasn't super specific in terms of the kind of issues that staff's been concerned about. It was pretty general, but yeah, that's where we got it from. And so, yeah, I think you guys can definitely discuss whether you want to treat that as a separate issue and deal with it in terms of incentives or maybe a requirement later on, or if you want to kind of edit the ordinance in some way to make it fit better, or just take it as is. You guys can choose how to approach that. But yeah, that is where it came from.
All right. So if any other questions or comments, we can go to discussion. Any discussion you want to make on that? I guess I was going to start off by just saying that I agree with Nick that on the panel upgrade thing, if we feel like it's a good thing for incentivizing electrification going forward, and the obstacles are concern about cost in a renovation where it's a couple thousand, and I agree with Nick, renovations are a couple $100,000 usually. Doesn't seem like it's a big issue. I mean, like a big burden. And if it is a big burden, then we have exceptions. But to remove it because of that feels like maybe too drastic a move. I would support looking at how to get the panel upgrades. I don't know that that's the answer, but if we feel like it's a good answer, then I think we should look a little bit more about how to make it work. Nick, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, and frankly, maybe what we can just do is say if it isn't a 200 amp panel, if they can come up with, electrician just puts together a load study And then they just put in the panel increase, or if their existing panel will support it, they can show that. I mean, as long as you can show that you can support a fully electrified home, then it's meeting the intent of what we're trying to do, which is to get these homes compliant. Now, not many people, I mean, there's 100 amp. When you go and look at what's available out there and what people do, there's 100 amp, then there's 200 amp, and those are the most common. And, it's just sort of industry standard. If you're going to the trouble, you're just going to put this 200 amp panel in. I don't know if there's like 150 amp or things that kind of go in between, but it'd be nice to get a little bit of input in that. If the hurdle is saying 200 amp, then we could say, you can do this more, just quick compliance thing of doing the 200 amp. Or if you don't want to do the full 200 amp, you can come up with an engineered solution that is totally acceptable as long as it meets a load that takes into consideration full electrification. So, I mean, that would build in some flexibility, but still not just completely drop the issue entirely. And frankly, I think at some point we need to have this where even at point of sale, this starts to go into effect. So these changes are being made and people are ready to have plug-in vehicles and electrified homes. It's just the way we need to really incentivize that. And I'll say some more things when we get into other comments on where the status of the CAP implementation. But I think this all comes down to, a lot of times I feel like we're trying to make a decision here that's supposed to carry us through 2045. It's like, this has to be a graduated, time-dependent, with milestones that we're all going through. And so it's kind of nice to say, well, we'll deal with that milestone somewhere, but I want to deal with it now. So if we're not going to require it now, at what date will we require it and how will we require it? And we need to have those things worked out now. Otherwise, it's just kicking the can down the road. Thanks.
Tom or Baxter are on the Green Committee, right? Did you have any comment? I'm not as close to it as you guys are, so did you have any comment on the panel thing?
I do. Max, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
No, you can go ahead, Tom.
So I think the issue with the permeable paving, I'm not sure how that was explained to planning and zoning, because it's not, and we're not talking about an engineered system that is what you see typically. I mean, in a home, it could be pavers so that the water filtrates down through the soil. It's what we're trying to do is get people not to pour concrete on their lots as much as we can. And so that is both an emissions issue, the more concrete that gets used, and it's also directly related to climate in the sense of not having that water from rain runoff going into the sewer system, but rather going into the aquifer. So I'm not sure I understand what the objection really is to it. It's not necessarily that much more expensive. There's lots of ways you can do this without pouring a slab in your backyard. And I agree with the way Nick is characterizing the issue of the panel upgrades, because we envision that as a step towards electrification, and looking at when people do major remodels or build an AHU, that really is the time that it's going to be least expensive for them to do it. And as Nick said, I mean, this is the point behind it, is that we're trying to get people to the point where when we can enforce electrification ordinance, that some of that infrastructure is already there. So I think those two things are important that we put back into the recommendations for the green building standards.
Max?
So I would also agree with Tom, and I think Tom was making some points that I was also just going to mention. So for the ADU, yes, it is something where we'd like to prevent, more use of concrete and cement, both for emissions reasons and also for the water retention. Again, it's been my experience that I do see the water being retained from the permeable pavement. We just put something in my backyard, and just in our own neighborhood, I observed that there's not excessive runoff. To me, also, just personally, I believe I see an aesthetic value to having less concrete and more permeable pavement. If I imagine a future, I'd like to see cities or villages or towns or neighborhoods with permeable paving in general, and not concrete and not a lot of cement. So I echo some of the comments that Tom was making and Preston, I believe, earlier. And then I would also just agree with Nick for the electric panels, and also I think what Chair Larson was saying, just that we do want to be opportunistic and try to intercept people, especially at the point of large retrofits. And I'd rather structure it so that there's something of a requirement or some requirements, and that there needs to be justification of exemptions or hardship or difficulties. Like the space issue may not be such a big issue as we think, if that's thought to be an issue, rather than saying, well, we all try to make incentives or approach it in the other direction, just because I believe this is a important feature of our climate action plan, and it's also an opportunity to try to strengthen the city's policies and also ready the housing stock for electrification. And it's true, I mean, there may be lower requirements or price reductions, but that might help to defer the equipment costs in the future if the panel is there. So yeah, I definitely be in favor of not cabling the electric panel or the permeable pavement measures here.
Nick?
Yeah, I want to bring up another thing too. I thought it was interesting. Jeremiah spoke again and raised this idea of more individual power independence, and actually having people electrify. Also, what will come into that is, and this is being looked at more, having resilient microgrids or resilience built into neighborhoods, where when there is a power outage, there's able to be at least minimal, functional use of electricity for certain periods of time. And those things are all part of our resilience. Not just our ability to reduce our emissions, but our ability to survive major catastrophes. And I might point out, if there's a major earthquake, everybody's going to lose gas and water. I mean, those lines are broken all over the place when there's a major earthquake. So they're going to shut the gas off in that condition. So electricity and microgrids and independent electricity and battery backed up electricity actually are going to be part of our resilience move also. So moving us more towards this electrified future is really critical. And I think I'm all for building in the flexibility so that people who really are doing something very minor and don't want to be hit with a big thing, they're taken into consideration. But I don't think that's going to be the lion's share of what's happening in even remodels and whatnot. I think people are going to appreciate taking these things into consideration now, rather than doing a very expensive remodel and then 5 years down the line finding out they put in all the wrong kind of equipment, that they're going to have to rip it out and replace it because there are even more odious requirements coming down the line as we get nearer to our goals. So I think early planning is really key here, and that's what this is about. And so, although I think I don't want to feel like we're being insensitive to cost, rattling the thing, wringing hands about cost. is not really where we want to be right now. I think we can approach it more intelligently than just throwing the whole thing out and saying, well, we shouldn't burden everybody with it.
So we should probably wrap up on this topic. Do we want to have the committee, the subcommittee, work on that some more, or have Michelle investigate some more? How do we want to proceed?
What's the timing, Michelle? Is there a timing issue here?
Is this something that the subcommittee needs to talk about further, or are you all ready to make recommendation tonight? I mean, I think if you're ready to make recommendation tonight, that would be ideal. We don't know when this would go to council, but
I think what you're hearing from us is that we like the previous version.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if it's not quite, if there's something, the panel that can be modified a little bit to, allow for some exceptions, that's fine. I mean, we could accommodate that, I suppose, but yeah, I agree.
if you would like to make, I mean, you're welcome to make whatever recommendation the committee as a whole agrees with. If you're going to recommend the panel upgrades, I think you have to address the cost issue. So like Eric said, maybe addressing that in some way with a waiver or something like that. But yeah, you're welcome to make whatever recommendation you wish.
Well, how typically when somebody goes to P&Z, if they want an exemption from a city ordinance because of financial hardship, isn't there a process for that?
I believe that's the case. I'm
Right,
not sure
so-
that these projects would go to planning and zoning. I mean, a larger project would, but if someone's just doing a panel upgrade, that would be
Right, but so
administrative.
if somebody's requesting a permit, applying for a permit, and there's an ordinance that they don't want to comply with, same kind of thing, they would ask for an exemption to that ordinance, whatever it may be, in that application process. No? What I'm getting at is
so.
I don't want to create another process.
Okay,
One
right.
already exists for people who have either from an economic hardship standpoint or an applicability standpoint, the ordinance doesn't make sense. So, in the examples that were cited of, it doesn't make sense to upgrade this to a 200 amp panel. They could apply for that exemption as they would for any other requirement.
I think each ordinance is very clear about the exemptions. I'm not positive about that, but that's my understanding. So I think if you were to recommend an ordinance, you probably would want to think about the exemptions as well. You don't have to think about that in detail. That can be something that staff make a recommendation to council on.
Okay.
Yeah, Nick?
So I'm not sure how these are normally written, but I know with accessibility requirements, there was, if something exceeds a certain percentage of the total project cost, there's sort of a cap. So is it possible to say that if, this panel upgrade, well, we could just say if the panel upgrade cost exceeds, 50% of the total project cost, then it's not required. Something like that, where it would just, people wouldn't have to worry about it overwhelming them, or it could be 25% or whatever. We could come up with a percentage, or we could actually open the door to an alternative engineered approach that would take care of, I kind of prefer the latter because we still want them to plan for electrification. We don't want them just to dodge out of it and then be hit with it later. So we could also make an exception for purely safety-related projects. Let's say someone has to get rid of knob and tube in their home and their old panel is completely a disaster, and so they just want to replace it with another 100 amp panel for a pure safety reason, then that would be exempt. So I think we can build some flexibility into this. I'm not sure if we can come up with it right now, or whether we could, what the right way to do it is if it's going back to the people that made the objections and say that, that are on staff in the building department that say, you see these things coming through day to day. Anyway, I'm kind of open for suggestions on that, or we can just come up with our own, I guess.
Yeah, Tom?
What I would suggest is that staff go back, do some research, come up with a recommendation, run it by the subcommittee. And I mean, we could pass a recommendation tonight that, this is what we're endorsing, and with the caveat that staff come back to us with the exceptions or exemptions that they think is appropriate. Because I don't have enough information tonight to say whether I would support 50 or 25 or whatever it is. I think we need to be careful about what we're recommending as an exemption. So I don't know about the timing of this. If this would get pushed to the September meeting and you come back with a recommendation that our subcommittee would have reviewed prior to that meeting, that may be the best way to approach this.
Would you be comfortable making a recommendation to council on the, the package as you prefer it? Because if we bring something to council, staff would do an analysis on what we'd recommend for exemptions. So I'm not sure if you want to be part of that process, or if you just want to make a recommendation for.
No, I think what I'm saying is I'd like to see that come back to the CAC so that we can see what those exemptions are, because we can't discuss them tonight. And I think it would also be good for us to have that discussion with the folks from P&Z that have been talking to us as well. Because I don't think it's a good idea for us to recommend something that's opposed by planning and zoning if there's some legitimate reasons why they're opposed to it. Because as far as I knew, that this wasn't something this is something we had to do by the end of the year, not by the end of the summer, correct? That was what we were looking at.
Yeah, as far as timeline, we don't have a set timeline. Our goal would be to get it by the end of the year, but we actually don't know when it would go to council at this point.
Okay, so I think that is the safe way to go, because I think we should have that kind of information about what staff comes back with as a recommendation for.
Yeah, and your point about making sure that we're coordinated with the P&Z as well. That's a great point. Yeah.
I guess I'm a little, I don't quite understand what your goal is here. I think, and Michelle, you were at the meeting and I wasn't for the Planning and Zoning Commission, so I might defer to you, but my understanding from the Planning and Zoning Commission is that these panel upgrades are not going to be part of a package that they would recommend. So I'm kind of confused as to what you're hoping for.
Well, from planning and zoning, they didn't talk about it a lot. The only real comment on it specifically was council chair or commission chair, Waddy, who basically said that she was concerned about the cost for the renovations, and that if they were going to recommend a proposal with panel upgrades in it, that it would have to have some economic hardship and feasibility exemptions to deal with that.
Sounds like
so they
we're
didn't take it out entirely, but it, I think they were concerned about it and definitely needed exemptions.
So that sounds pretty close to what we were saying, is put it back in with some wiggle room for exemptions, and that sounds like it would fly. So Tom's proposal was to have Michelle and the subcommittee revise the panel upgrade with some sort of exemptions, and then discuss that with the planning and zoning, and then come back to CAC next meeting
in September. Yeah, that would give us enough time to do that.
Yep. All right, Nick.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused why planning and zoning has any concern about panel upgrades at all. And then the economics, I mean, that seems to be completely out of their purview, unless it's related to just the building department. Is that it? I mean, I'm not, was that more going, I mean, why wouldn't we just talk with Jeff Bond or someone like that about concerns from the building department point of view? I would talk to the city building official. Planning and zoning seems to be more about land use and to bring, and you have one planning and one, not all of them. This isn't a unanimous recommendation. One being concerned about economics, which is again kind of tangential to everything. I don't see why we're deferring so much to them. Planning and zoning is not out of sync. It sounds like mostly they supported this, but had a little concern about a economic hardship for people that are experiencing economic hardship. I kind of have a feeling it is an economic hardship to people doing hundreds of thousands of dollar renovations in Albany after buying millions of dollar homes. So I think we can work in something. I guess my question is to staff, can't we just work something in that brings in this economic hardship very simply and just go back to our old thing saying, and there's an exception if you can show this kind of economic hardship, and find out what the parameters are for that. Is that something that would be straightforward to do, or is that difficult?
Sorry, Nick, you're suggesting that you make a recommendation tonight and we work on the hardship, that staff work on the hardship piece? Is that?
I'm just trying to follow him up with what Tom was recommending. He was asking you to go off and do some studying of how we can have some exemptions in order to address the economic hardship. And all I want to know is, do you know what to do if we ask you to do that? Is that something that's straightforward to do?
I don't know. My understanding is that the staff recommendation is not going to include panels, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation is likely to not include panels. So I'm not really sure what staff's role is.
No, I don't get that at all.
That's not what Michelle just said.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the difference between the staff recommendation and the planning and zoning feedback, I think the staff feedback is really where most of these concerns about the panels came from. You were mentioning talking to Jeff Bond and the building department about what they thought, and there was a lot of concern from the staff about these issues, a variety of issues, not just with the costs, but with the feasibility and with safety and all these other issues. And yeah, the Planning and Zoning Commission didn't have a ton to say about it because it isn't, their main, it's not in their main sort of scope. But I think they were just concerned about, raising costs, and there was a variety of views on the commission, but all of the members, well, 4 out of 5, I guess, were concerned about raising costs for renovations in any capacity. So I guess that's sort of the difference there. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom?
So Ian McLeod from Planning and Zoning was working with me and Max and Michelle. So that's part of where I'm coming from, is that Ian was a major contributor to our proposal. And so what I would like is the opportunity to talk to him again. If I don't have a problem with having exemptions based on some formula that makes sense, but I'd like to have his input. It's not so much as about the role of planning and zoning, it's just they're part of the process and they have an influence, and we're doing something that staff doesn't necessarily fully support. So I think it's important to, if we have the support of planning and members of planning and zoning anyway, to this approach. I think that's an important step for us as we bring something like this to council. So it's not just us being out on a limb proposing something that there aren't people in planning and zoning that agree. So
And,
that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay. That seems like it's pretty much consensus as far as the committee then. I mean, from what I'm hearing is go back to find a way to put the panel upgrades in with some exemptions that make sense, talk to planning and zoning, and bring it back to the Climate Action Committee in September. For
As well as the permeable paving.
And the permeable paving, yeah. Yeah, Michelle?
Sorry, and about adding the ADUs, that was the third thing on there. Did you guys, I know that's a little bit less contentious, but did you guys have any thoughts about that? Do you just support adding the ADUs on as well?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Just wanted to check.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted them to be required to be electrified. So this is not anything close to what we were looking for.
Okay, I think we should wrap this up pretty quick. We got EV action plan to go as well. Nick, did you have another comment?
Well, I guess I think I heard Michelle say that we can't require ADUs to be 100% electric, and we've confirmed that that's absolutely not allowed and violates California or California legislature or the rules that California established.
Yeah, that's right. That's not in the running right now. The ADU measure that was brought up by staff here is just for those other measures that apply to residential.
So that means we'll have, people do hook ADUs up to gas in the interest of sort of early on economics, first cost things. We're going to be hitting them later when we phase out gas. I think there are ways we can approach that with city information and education about encouraging people to make them all electric. And I think we really need to do that when they come in and get information on there. But anyway, we can deal with that later. So if it's totally impossible or it's a violation of state law or whatever to require all electric ADUs, then yeah, we can't pursue that.
Okay, so we got it clear, got it set. Michelle and Tom, we good? Yeah, okay. Looks like that's closed then, to be revisited September. Okay, cool. All right, thanks. Okay, so Lizzie and Bianca, we moving on to EV action plan?
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay. So I'll be giving an update on behalf of the EV subcommittee. So the subcommittee consists of Chair Larson, Vice Chair Martin, Committee Member Peterson, and we've also had Michelle sit in and help out with a couple of the previous meetings. We've met 3 times, I believe, since the last committee meeting, and this is an update on our work for the plan based on the feedback that we received from the committee last meeting, asking for more information about EV adoption rate goals. So this is a recap of the overall strategy of the plan. I'm just going to kind of go over some of the information that I included in the last committee meeting's presentation just to refresh everybody. But the plan aims to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, and that represents the largest source of emissions at 56%.
the EV action plan will supplement the active transportation plan. So as a city, we are prioritizing alternative modes of transportation and recognize that first and foremost, personal vehicle use should be minimized. The EV plan will also prioritize shared electric transportation, including e-bikes and electrified public transportation, things that are not strictly considered active transportation. And we also want to ensure that in the future, especially as more multifamily units are built in Albany, we are prioritizing shared electric transportation, such as electric bicycles, electric scooters, electric car sharings, and more in multifamily units and for the public at large as well. But for cases where someone does need to use a personal vehicle, this plan aims to support the switch from internal combustion engines vehicles to electric vehicles through incentives for electric vehicles and EV charging in single and multifamily homes. Sorry, okay. So this is, again, just the general outline of the plan, just to recap. So what we'll be discussing today is mainly the goal of EV adoption rate by a certain date. So we'll establish a goal. The plan will also include a map of high priority charging locations and the types of charging locations, charging stations for each location. To accompany this, we'll also have a list of considerations for charging locations and charging types. Namely, this will include prioritizing multifamily developments and denser business areas. The plan also includes a prioritized action item list, that actions being broken down into 3 categories for outreach and education, actions to increase charging infrastructure, and regional collaboration efforts. So really briefly, these are some of the main actions under the outreach and education section. I also wanted to mention that the electrification guide and the page on the city website is underway. I'm working with an intern to develop that, so that is exciting. So yeah, these are some of the main proposed actions in the EV action plan to increase charging infrastructure, and they're divided by measures meant to target community adoption and also target municipal adoption. These are some of the main actions under regional partnerships, under the regional partnership section, and I do want to underscore that we want to ensure that lower income residents who need personal vehicles can access EVs, and that we are actively engaging with these communities and providing proper incentives to them, as well as promoting used EVs and car share options. So some of you may remember this slide from last time. These are a list of the goals of various California cities' EV action plans. Again, I mentioned this last time, but there are a variety of ways that cities have determined EV adoption goals. The one that we've been focusing on is percentage of EV adoption, or the EV adoption rate, as opposed to a raw number. So I wanted to include information on current trends based on raw numbers of EV purchases in Albany as well as the state. So while the scale is different on the 2 graphs, you can see it probably doesn't come as much of a surprise, but the trend line for Albany, there is an exponential trend line, and the EV sales in Albany mirrors that of the state overall. And then this graph shows the annual percentage of EVs of total car purchases in Albany, that's in blue. And you can see Albany, percentage-wise, is above the state average, and the state average is the orange line. And while some rebates for EVs some federal rebates did disappear in 2018, you can still see that this little dip here is not that significant of a dip considering the rebates were taken away. So just wanted to call that out as well. So now I want to talk about this graph, which Michelle helped put together. So thank you, Michelle, for that. So this models the percent of annual purchases in Albany that are EVs in blue, as well as the percent of total vehicles in Albany over time, which is orange, in orange. So I want to preface and say that this graph is not perfect, but it is a tool to help us inform our goals. And we've based it on the best available information to us. And this kind of general shape of the curve, this kind of S curve that you see, does mirror the kind of adoption rate that other cities, or kind of the adoption trend that other cities are using in their electric vehicle action plans. And this graph is based on a 7% annual turnover rate of vehicles in Albany. And that is based on a lifespan of 13 to 17 years for an average internal combustion engine vehicle. So we use the lower end of that range because we do know that people buy and sell used cars. And this 7% range matches up pretty well to data that we found for car registration dates in Albany as well. And yeah, I will explain this graph more fully in a second, but I want to point out that this graph shows a 35% adoption rate, EV adoption rate by 2030, 64% adoption rate by 2035, and a 100% adoption rate by 2045. So this graph starts out around our current annual EV adoption rate of 14%. So first I want to discuss what the next 5 years or so will look like, which is kind of the flatter part of this curve, until EVs are expected to hit price parity with ICE vehicles between 2024 and 2025. And also the text in green represents external factors that affect EV adoption, while the text in yellow represents Albany specific actions. And the placement of these kind of bubbles for the actions in yellow provides a general timeline for implementation. They're not necessarily the exact dates, but they're kind of a rough estimate of how we'd want to move forward. So in the short term, we want to start by laying the groundwork for charging infrastructure by requiring EV chargers in new construction for multifamily and single family. Current building codes also require spots with EV charging capacity for renovations. We also aim to partner with EBCE to provide incentives for chargers, particularly for multifamily units. And it's also crucial, as I mentioned, to partner regionally with organizations that are doing outreach to lower income communities and making sure we're providing information on incentives and discounts to low income drivers. Then, as price parity hits for ICE vehicles and EVs around 2024, this model assumes that there will be a large rise in annual EV sales as EVs become equally as cheap or cheaper than to operate than internal combustion engine vehicles. Also in 2025, there's going to be, as of the information we have now, there will be over 40 new models of EVs on the market by over 25 different car manufacturers that are planned to be released in 2025 that provide more options, not necessarily just the luxury EV, which I think is a decent amount of the EVs sold today. So meanwhile, as we move past that kind of 2025 date, we will also be providing incentives for panel upgrades at home. That will ensure that people can charge vehicles where they live. That will be mainly in single family homeowners and renters. So that way, if people want an EV, it won't be costly to put the infrastructure into their home. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that as Albany gains housing density, we are providing electric mobility options such as electric bikes, scooters, and car sharing to residents. This can come in the form of electric mobility hubs and multifamily units and other denser popular locations in Albany. So while there will be people transitioning out of their ICE vehicles and some will want to go for EVs, we do want to make it easy for those getting rid of their ICE vehicles to and the new residents moving in as well to get around via active or shared electric transportation and forgo their car. So currently, 75 to 80% of people who have an EV actually lease an EV. So that means as EVs gather steam after 2025, there are going to be a lot more that are going to come on to the used EV market. And used EVs are far cheaper than buying new, sometimes a fifth of the price after one use or after one buyer previously has used it. though this may change somewhat as batteries develop longer ranges. But we want to promote used EVs as an affordable option for those looking to drive, and particularly for low-income folks who need a car. I also wanted to mention that California passed a law actually a few weeks ago, some of you may have seen it, requiring that 50% of the trucks sold in California by 2035 must be electric, and 100% in 2045 must be electric. And so these vehicles, many of which are commercial, would otherwise be the slowest to transition to electric models, as there's not that many models for it now, but that does bode well for the future and ensuring that we can have commercial vehicles in Albany, as well as other smaller trucks, be electric. Nevertheless, we do anticipate that there will be some folks who have resistance to purchasing an electric vehicle. And so the annual adoption rate slows down here as those late adopters eventually transition. So yeah, as I mentioned, last month, the committee had a brief discussion of goal setting and had asked the subcommittee and staff to do further research. So based on this further research and the modeling that we've done here, we've determined the following proposal here as ambitious yet feasible goals, being 35% EV adoption by 2030, 64% by 2035, and 100% by 2045. And this is the recommendation from staff as well as the subcommittee. And it would be great if we could get a recommendation from the committee as well, just so that we can move forward with other portions of the plan too. So in terms of next steps, right now, the committee can discuss, potentially recommend EV adoption rate goals to the council. I will also be presenting plan elements of the EV action plan to the Transportation Commission for feedback next week. The subcommittee will continue to inform the development of the plan, and the staff will continue developing plan and eventually bring to the committee for a recommendation. Once the plan is finalized, it will be implemented in order of priority actions as well as ease of implementation. So, yes, that was a lot of information, and I'm happy to take any questions before going into full discussion.
Yeah, Max?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bianca, for the presentation. That was really very comprehensive and detailed, especially the S-curve plot. I guess I just wanted to clarify again the adoption versus the sales. So on one of your earlier slides, Berkeley is showing a 100% of sales by 2030 target.
Yeah.
Middle of the slide. And so I just wanted to just clarify, it looked like from your S-curve plot that for Albany, you have something like about 88% of sales. I mean, it's somewhere between 75% and 100% in 2030. So
by 2030? Yeah.
By 2030, about 80, say 90%.
Yeah, it's, yeah, at the on the graph, it would show 80%. It would show an 80% of annual sales being EVs in 2030.
Right. Okay.
And
because
yeah,
some of the text in the later slide about the adoption is still a little bit subject to ambiguity, because I think it says something like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you flip to that slide, it says like 64% adoption, 90% and 100% adoption. So that's, again, you know, those are the numbers of vehicles. That is not the percentage of annual sales, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, right. Okay. So you might just clarify that in the slide that the targets are either for the fraction of vehicles on the road or the annual sales. And I do like the annual sales as a goal, just to highlight.
Yeah, I think. Oh, Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I think, well, the way I think Berkeley had done it, it wasn't so much that they had initially gone out to set an annual sales target. It was more that they had created those goals and figured out the target afterwards. That was my impression from speaking with Berkeley staff. And so, yes, if we go back, actually, sorry. If we go back here, yeah, so right here, it's the percent of total vehicles in Albany, while the sales would be at 80% EVs in that year. And I think the major difference, like if you see Berkeley, I believe they said, they had their 2025 goal was also very ambitious, based by annual sales. Just if people are interested, for reference, our 2025 goal has 33% of annual purchases BEVs. I think the main difference that came between some of the numbers that you'd see here and our calculation was those first 5 years, where, but again, until once EVs start becoming cheaper to own than ICE vehicles, you can imagine a huge uptick. But until that happens, we are assuming a lower rate of adoption.
Yeah, I just make the comment that if the goal is the state goal, well, yeah, it is a policy goal to get carbon neutrality by 2045, that if you have sales of ICE vehicles, like 20% of the ICE, 20% of the sales are ICE vehicles in 2030, then there will be some population of vehicles which will be still on the road in 15 years. So you can think of it like 1,000 vehicles sold, and there's going to be a tail. Average might be 13 years, but there's going to be some vehicles which may last for 20 years, and still gasoline being sold. So to get to zero, you really need to get closer to all of the sales being electric by 2030. So I'm just not sure that the goal, as currently stated, is consistent with zero carbon in 2045, unless we're saying we're going to offset this with some street traveling or negative emissions, just by that simple argument of the lifetime of vehicles having a tail. So as you pointed out, there's a distribution, but the distribution will be wider than 13 to 17 years. It could be 11 to 26 years or something.
Yeah, I'd like to just add, I think that's a great point. But I just wanted to bring your attention to one thing, is that if you look at that curve, we would hit about 100% by, I think it's 2041. Yeah. Which is just an interesting point when we're factoring in those numbers.
That's not how I'm reading the curve, though, because all the way out to 2041, you're having some sales of ICE, because the sales rate is not 100% until 2021. Right, so to me, it's saying that you're selling non-electric cars out until 2021. I mean, the blue curve, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the graph shows is it's very nearly approaching 100. Yeah, there's still, if the sales continue roughly at 99% a year, I mean, you could round, I guess, differently. There will be some level of cars on the road that are still ICE vehicles. But yeah, that's a good point that you raise. Yeah, I mean, I know that in our cap, we do include, especially courtesy of action item to create an urban forestry plan. We are also making sure that there's ways to offset our remaining emissions. Yeah,
Nick? Yeah.
Sorry, no, I'm done.
Nick, got a question?
Yeah, I mean, this was a real difficult exercise, and there's so many moving parts and all sorts of things are going on, and we don't know what the state's going to start to implement. I mean, I would hope at some point in the 2035 range, the state would implement a kind of cash for clunkers kind of thing. Actually, when you look at the DMV information for Albany, it's amazing that almost half the cars in Albany are 2006 and older. And there's like 750 older Toyota Corollas. in Albany. And so there's some people that'll just hold on to the cheapest way you can go forever. So the only way you're going to lure them away from that is to give them money to just tank those cars. So there's some other programs that are going to come in, you know, that maybe Albany needs to look at implementing also. So again, this is sort of what we want to have happen, but you know, that people are still buying. Hopefully this orange curve goes up even steeper and aligns, you know, kind of more with the blue curve earlier, you know, more in the 2035 range. But this was just looking at, you know, how many cars of what year were in Albany and how, so they just turn over at 7%. It doesn't mean that people are going to, you know, if there's enough of incentive, people will get rid of those cars earlier, or, you know, maybe there'll be some laws that just don't allow you to sell them, or maybe we'll have laws you can't even park them. So there's all sorts of ways of incentivizing buying internal combustion engine cars. You know, one would hope 15 years from now, things are going to be radically different.
Right. And probably not.
But it's not going to be radically different because of what Albany does. I guess that's what.
Yeah. Any other questions? I didn't. Oh, yeah, Nick.
Well, one other thing
we're going to discuss after questions.
Okay.
Also,
okay,
so I didn't see if there's any public hand raising.
There's one. Is that what?
Jeremiah again?
So I was just going to try to cover questions first and then get to Jeremiah. So, all right. So go ahead, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, I think you're unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening. So yeah, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. So this electrical vehicle situation, I went on Tesla's website, and Albany does not have a Tesla charging station. They just put one up at Ranch 99. All you have to do is go on Tesla's website and apply. I was about to do it, but I figure Albany should do it. They probably have a tax ID number. I don't know. But you should go on Tesla, try to figure that out. That way, people are going to buy these electric vehicles. They have a way to charge them, give them an incentive. Because why would you buy an electric vehicle if there's no way to charge it in the city you live? So my suggestion would be to put that at the city hall. Every single parking station in the city hall parking lot could be a Tesla charging station. And also tomorrow I'm working at Pier 80 in San Francisco, and Cesar Chavez at the bottom. And we ship Teslas from Pier 80. So tomorrow the Grand Dolphin's coming in. I start at 6 o'clock till 6 o'clock p.m., 12-hour shift. So I see all these Teslas being shipped every day, and they go to Europe and Australia and China. So this electric vehicle is really big. I see Teslas being shipped, and it's a real thing, and they're not going away. So electric vehicles are here to stay forever. Thank you.
Good. Thanks. Any other? For some reason, I'm not seeing the others participants.
There are no other attendees at the moment.
All right. So discussion, and I guess I just wanted to say it was fun working on the subcommittee with Allison and Nick and Bianca and Michelle. And it was good feedback from the last committee session, which was we have, maybe high level goals, but we don't really have any sort of template for how we're going to get there. So this was an attempt, like Bianca said, to put a model to that. And so it was a really good exercise to go through that. And so this was, hopefully a little bit more of like reasons to believe or things to put as milestones. But it's a model. And to Max's point, it's not maybe perfect, but it's a model, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the future, but at least it gives us a reason to think that these goals are actually, aggressive and achievable. So that was just my comment. So Max, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest to the committee is that I'd like to see us more aggressive with these adoption rate goals. So we saw the nice data which showed a large ramp up in the adoption rate in Albany to 15% in 2017-ish. So that's very encouraging. I see more EVs, like sometimes a stop sign and 3 EVs in a row. So it's really encouraging. I think that trend can continue. I'm just trying to make the point that there's a triangle of vehicles just above the blue line to the 100%, starting in 2030 or even 2028. There's a triangle or wedge of vehicles, and so that's going to be. You can calculate how many vehicles that is. Just call it a number like, say, 5,000 vehicles. And so, unless we're saying that all of those will go away by 2045, in other words, we will have to retire some of those as early as 1 year or 3 years into their lifetime, and there will be some remaining fraction of those vehicles on the road, and they will be emitting CO2. And so that is not consistent with our carbon neutrality goal in 2045 for the state. And so I just think that we should set the target at 100% adoption in 2030. And say, well, we don't know how to get there. We may fall short. We only be 1%, or maybe it's 73%. Who knows? But that should be our goal, to be consistent with it. That should be our target, to be consistent with the goal of carbon neutrality by 2045, which is the state goal. Because otherwise, I just don't think that this is being aggressive enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about aggressive. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think what the epiphany I had was we kind of looked at how can we get everybody with an ICE vehicle to buy an electric vehicle. And that's really not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about, and what I'd like to see this chart more try to incorporate, is we're trying to get people to stop miles traveled in ICE vehicles and change that to miles traveled using zero emission vehicles. So we're sort of struggling between these two things. This adoption rate is just really private vehicle ownership. But I think what'll and I agree with Max, I think we really need to show a steeper line a little bit earlier on, and reaching that zero, maybe not all the way, but and get away from vehicles purchased and more into how people travel. Because I think, especially with the people that live in rental housing, it's going to be really important to have even like shared and available, just temporary use, or even Uber and whatever in electric vehicle available. So we've got to work with partners to try to get that stuff rolled in. So we don't think so much of everyone turning the entire car stock of Albany over. And then the other thing that I think is going to happen is that as the state gets closer to this goal, they're going to start putting disincentives on internal combustion. I hope, otherwise we won't make it. I mean, hopefully there will be increased gas taxes, increased other things that really make it much more advantageous to move to electric. And as long as there's, either rebate incentives or whatever, I mean, you can see how they impact, that dip in 2018, that was, Tesla's rebates went down by 50%. So instead of 7,500, you're getting 3,750. So that was a big drop. And I think they dropped even more. And now I don't think they even get a federal incentive. So incentives and everything are important still. The other thing I want to bring up, and I think Bianca struggled with this also, and until you reach this parity thing, it's just early adopters kind of coming in. So to some degree, we're stuck until we reach the parity level and more options available, especially used car options coming in. that people that are holding on to these cars for a long period of time will buy a used electric vehicle. So that, and then the third point that I think is really important and underscores why it's so important to get the electrification right and distributed amongst everything is, and I have to thank Jeremiah again for bringing this up, you don't need charge stations as prevalent as gas stations. You don't need that. Well, maybe you do, but only for long distance travel if you're not near your home. What I always like to tell people is when you have an electric vehicle, you can tell people, I have a gas pump at my home that gives me gas at 1/3 the cost of what everyone else pays at a gas station, and all I have to do is gas up every night at home. Why would I ever go to a gas station again? Well, the only reason you go is you're not at home. So it's just for you don't need public charge points all over the place if you're driving your vehicle around your locale and doing just what normal commutes are. If you're doing long distance commutes, then it becomes a bigger deal. But I think for the majority of people just using their car around town and maybe on a few Bay Area trips, being able to plug in at home is the way they're going to fuel their car. And that's what we have to support. And we have to make that really so prevalent that people go to these electric vehicles.
Yeah. So Max, to your question or comment, if you remember the last committee meeting, we presented goals and they were fairly aggressive. And the committee's feedback was, okay, nice goals, but why do we have any reason to believe that this is going to happen? So that's what the subcommittee did, was we went back and tried to model how it could happen. And we would all like to see a faster adoption rate, but we couldn't make the model look anything like reasonable with a faster adoption rate. So that's why we kind of wanted to present what we did to this committee, so we could talk about what we as a committee want to choose as goals for EV adoption rate. And I think EV adoption rate is a reasonable surrogate for no zero or no emission vehicles travel or something. I mean, we have to have some goal. So it's, Nick, I agree. It's not all about personal car use, but it's a reasonable surrogate for now as a goal. So, that's, if we looked at that curve, if you look at it in detail, the next 5 years is what we have to make that curve go vertical. And that's a really short time. And we couldn't convince ourselves that was going to happen any faster than that. And so we can look at the curve some more and figure out what we want to put as goals. But, we worked pretty hard on this model, best we could for, what's their turnover rate, what's the external factors, what's the incentives we can provide, what can we reasonably do as an Albany city, those kind of things. And that's why we put those milestones in there. So if we want to look at the curve and see how we want to adjust those goals, that's fine. But I just wanted to say that we as the subcommittee did think about that and really challenge ourselves on what this model could be. And this is what we came up with as the, sort of that hybrid between aggressive goals and what's even, conceivable as reality. Yeah, Tom.
What are you proposing that's going to happen in the next 5 years that's going to change buying behavior? What incentives or actions are you proposing that the city would take that's going to change that?
Yeah, I think that the external factors are probably bigger than what the city can do. One of the external factors we think, as far as, what we could find as far as, articles and predictions and whatever, that price parity of electric vehicles is going to be in about 5 years will match match gas vehicles. And once we hit that, then it's like, everything is pushing towards no emissions. And now you don't have the, the cost of ownership issue and also you have more choice of vehicles. So you get it's not just a luxury car anymore. It's for everybody can, do this. So that's what I think we looked at for in 5 years would be the tipping point.
Because, when looking at this, I agree. I'm just wondering what even with the, these action items here, I don't know that that changes behavior in the next 5 years, because the city's not going to come up with enough money as a financial incentive.
We could go back through the strategies that we have in the climate action plan that are posted on there as far as what the city can do. Things like information, incentives, charging station infrastructure, panel upgrades on houses so that you can more easily accommodate charging stations. That kind of stuff is what the city can do. We can talk about whether it's enough, or maybe with the funding from the UUT we'll be able to do more. But those things were in that curve.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is we're probably a very small percent that we can influence. I'm not saying I disagree with the goals or anything like that. I'm just, a reality check for what we're actually being able to do. Maybe it's only 5% of the impact, but we should still do it. I was just trying to understand that, because it didn't seem like much is really going to come from Albany. I mean, even if we get people to, some people to do the panel upgrades, it's more what's going to happen outside of Albany that's going to drive this.
Yeah.
Which I think you've said.
Yeah, Nick.
So I think what's good is if we can get information out, especially there are good incentives now for, especially they go higher for low income to incentivize purchase of EVs. And I think if we can get that information out to more people, they might consider EVs more. Right now, they might not be aware of it. So I think promoting, this San Jose has a really excellent site on. You can go look at their EV thing, and it outlines how the costs can come in for people that fall into a certain category and then are seriously considering getting a new vehicle. That's probably a small percentage, but at least if we can get it out there and make sure they make the right choice. And again, I think it's really important that that the use of it is as economical and easy to do as possible, which the big hurdle there then is in the multifamily housing, trying to get places where people can charge their vehicles. So I think there's something we could do there to maybe make that more available. I don't know what it is, but that's where we could put our energies. So I think it's education and incentivizing charge points in and near multifamily housing.
Right. And as you know, that's why we put those things in the beginning of the curve, as far as actions that should be done. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? This was all gearing up towards, making a recommendation for City Council to actually adopt EV adoption goals for the city. Sorry. Okay, Max, you.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to comment that I like what Nick, you were saying. I think that, kind of within this or embedded within this is the notion that the city, and also speaking to what Tom, you were asking about, that the city can try to do as much as it can to encourage shift away from ICE vehicles purchases, but also this notion of mode shifting, like maybe it's more two-wheeled transportation, bicycles, scooters, electric bikes, what have you. But I guess I'm just wondering if we go in with this adoption, then to me it's just a sort of conceding that we're not going to meet zero emissions by 2045. And so, if everyone is okay with that, then that's fine. But to me, it just doesn't seem consistent overall with that objective, with that goal.
So, Max, are you breaking up a bit?
I'm sorry.
Was it just
me? Saying that with this, it just doesn't seem consistent with the carbon neutrality goal in 2045.
So your point is there'll still be fossil fuel cars on the road in 2045 with this model because they haven't been turned over yet.
Right.
Okay. Nick?
And so if that's what we're saying, I agree with everything that's been discussed, that may in fact be the realistic view from today's standpoint. Of course, technology changes and we can't anticipate, what can happen, but I can agree with that, but I just don't know if we want to embed that, enshrine that moving forward to say, well, we're gonna miss by this much for transportation, we're gonna miss this much on other areas, so we're gonna right on the get-go, we're gonna be, missing,
right.
just by setting up our goals and projects. And if we're doing that, I just want to be very conscious and aware of that.
Okay, thanks. Nick?
I think it's kind of semantics. Can we go back to the dual curve there, the orange? And so I think in reality, what's really going to happen is because it's going to be so impractical to still have a gas car, and as gas diminishes and gas stations go out of business, and I think you're going to see that orange curve start to accelerate up to essentially vertical. It won't do this little plateau off. So I would actually argue that somewhere around 2037, it's going to start, people will just no longer buy an internal combustion car. I also think California is going to implement some disincentives. Otherwise, they're going to miss the whole California goal too. And California has led the way in requiring, they're going to put caps on how many ICE vehicles are out there, and they're going to start penalizing those, and it's just going to happen. So I think to have this line just go straight like this doesn't make sense. I think we should accelerate it at the end, and that gets rid of, 1937. We should say no one in Albany is going to be buying a gas car anymore.
Bianca, can you advance a couple to get the, So if we take this and put in an Albany or an external factor at around 2035, that is impractical to use and own a fossil fuel car and then just shoot it straight up to the top. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, no, I was thinking, I think much more serious disincentives will start coming in.
I'm saying whatever we want to say, but put in a disincentive marker there to show that we think that at that point there's going to be no further over. Oh, is that 2035? Yeah, whatever. And then that would give 10 years to 2045 to get all the gas cars off the road. Would that be? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
or something like that?
What I see Max kind of stumbling over is our curve doesn't back up what we're telling them, because there's this triangle here of ICE vehicles that aren't going to go away.
Right. And
so let's get rid of the triangle by making that orange line go more vertical, and top out at 100% in 20, more like 2038. Or something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to go straight up, but I think what will happen, I think what's going to happen, frankly, I am never going to drive an ICE car again in my life. I hate ICE cars now. I can't stand them. Every time I see one of them go by, it makes all this noise. It's annoying. And electric vehicle driving is just so superior. It's such a superior way to get around. Luckily I can afford it, but I think by 2036, that should be happening for everybody, regardless of income.
And I think that Max's comment is fantastic. And I think your idea about that is also very good, that this is a model, so we can say what we think is going to happen or what needs to happen to achieve the goals. And that's actually a really good solution, I think, is to put in a mile marker there that says, at this point, it's impractical to own a fossil fuel gas car, and model it that way. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, well, not radically. I mean, I would just show that orange, especially after you get parity on.
The blue line has to go up to 100%, and then the orange line can follow it to 100%. But what we're saying is,
I think the orange line needs to. What Max is saying, the orange line needs to hit 100% before the blue line does, because then
it can't. The orange line is the overall number of vehicles in Albany. The blue line is the percent per year of electrical vehicle purchases. So
yeah, I gotcha.
The blue line has to go up to 100%. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is the blue, I think there's going to be more, after the parity accelerates, but I don't think it'll level off like that. I think it'll just top out more. So let's just make it top out sooner. Because I think they're going to be, and that'll be like with the 50% trucks, you can have another green thing that says disincentives on state and mandated disincentives on fossil fuel vehicles.
I think we're in agreement. I think the only question is what year to put that in. If we put it in at 2040, then that gives us 5 years for that to, take care of all the gas cars on the road.
May I also say one thing quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Again, sorry, just want to reiterate the point about our goal is carbon neutrality at 2045, and one way of offsetting emissions is through using our urban forestry plan and increasing canopy in the city to sequester carbon. So I did just want to say that if there is some residual amount of carbon being produced at that year, then the cap that was passed kind of like also takes that into account. I just wanted to put that point out there as well.
Yeah, just a comment but I think we're gonna, we have bigger hurdles than just, the vehicles that move us around. I think buildings that are generating carbon there are some that are going to be extremely difficult to move to zero carbon. Right. So I think our sequestration efforts are going to be much more sucked up with those than they are. So the transportation is sort of like low hanging fruit.
Right.
You can literally, if we aren't all moving around fossil fuel free by 2035, we're screwed. Nothing's going to work.
So if we put in that kind of post at, 2035, 2040, and it's a drastic, and we say we're expecting something like it's really not feasible to own and operate a gas car anymore. Would we be comfortable saying, okay, this is going to turn everything over to 100% non-fossil fuel by our goal? What's a year we want to choose for that curve?
Can I jump in right now? It's just to do a time check. It's 9:43 and you have 2 other items on your agenda. And this is not an item that is time sensitive. So one option would be, well, first you have to make a motion to continue the meeting because it's past 9:30. But also, if you want to think about considering sending this back to the subcommittee, that's an option.
Okay. Yeah, we could take that feedback and work on a model that we can present at the September meeting. That'd be fine with me. Nick?
I make a motion that we extend another 30 minutes.
Any second?
Second motion.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Looks like we extend to the 30 minutes.
So
Is that okay with staff? Do you have a vote? Okay. This is the last time we have, anyway. Okay, so subcommittee, is that what we're saying?
I would say be more than happy to, Bianca, I think, if you could set up another meeting and we'll play with this and we'll come up with some justification.
Yeah.
I think Max has a valid point, but I think we can make it look more, more like it's doing that, and we can come up with reasons why.
Yeah, I agree. It's good.
Thanks.
All right. So.
All right.
Okay. Proceed.
Next item on the agenda, it's with a heavy heart. This is Bianca's final meeting with this Climate Action Committee because her service year as an AmeriCorps Civic Spark Climate Fellow is coming to a close on July 31st. So we thought we'd take a few moments to honor her with a proclamation of appreciation. I will share it with everyone. Okay. So, in honor of Bianca Hutner's term of service to the City of Albany, whereas Bianca Hutner has dedicated her time to serve the city as a Civic Spark Climate Fellow, and whereas Bianca came to the City of Albany with a passion for sustainability, active transportation, and community engagement, and whereas Bianca provided valuable research and assistance to further the city's sustainable procurement policy goals, remaining patient and optimistic as the policy evolved, and whereas Bianca engaged Albany High School volunteers to increase usership of the Carbon Free Albany platform, which led to 24 additional households saving 32,000 pounds of carbon dioxide annually. And whereas Bianca is recognized for her commitment to environmental justice and equity and community empowerment. And whereas Bianca organized an electrification workshop for the Albany community to learn about lowering the carbon footprint of households. And whereas Bianca was instrumental in helping the city pursue its electric vehicle charging goals through the development of an electric mobility action plan, spearheading development of electric mobility goals, working closely with the electric vehicle subcommittee of the Climate Action Committee. And whereas Bianca always remained positive even when faced with an unexpected project or setback, adapting quickly to challenges presented by COVID-19. And whereas Bianca's dedication and expertise have assisted the city in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, making an impact on global climate change. And whereas Bianca consistently maintained a low carbon footprint by biking to work, rain or shine. And whereas Bianca's remarkable commitment to environmental stewardship serves as a model to others. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Albany wishes to express its sincere gratitude and appreciation for Bianca Hutner's service term within the City of Albany to help foster a sustainable future, and wishes her the best in her future endeavors. So we will do a motion to pass and adopt this proclamation of appreciation for Bianca Hutner.
So moved.
All right, give me 1 sec to pull up my notes.
Does it need a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. I'll do a roll call vote. Committee member Breeding.
Aye.
Committee member Choi. Committee member Choi, I think you may have been muted. Okay, I saw your mouth move. Vice Chair Martin. Oh, sorry. Committee member Cooper.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin.
Aye.
Committee member Peterson. Uh-oh, may have been muted. Committee member Peterson. Okay. Committee member Way.
Aye.
Chair Larson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, go ahead.
You earned it, Bianca. You definitely did. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that very personal proclamation. I've never had a proclamation before, so it feels good. And yeah, thank you to everyone on the committee that I've talked to or had meetings with, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to really grow into my own kind of in the government space. And thanks for pushing me to do my work and work harder. And yeah, it has been a pleasure, and I'm really sad about it, but I'm happy to have happy that it has happened. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's been great having you. Where are you off to now?
Oh, we have no idea. It is a weird time to be doing any job search stuff. So I don't know, but I am hoping I'm going to be staying at least in the Bay for probably a couple more months to see what next steps may arise. But I am hoping to at least remain here for the short term. California and Albany has definitely made an imprint on my Bostonian background. So, yeah.
Well, you definitely have a lot of references you can use here.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Bianca.
It's great working with you on the EV project.
Yeah, it was great to work with you all too.
Okay. Thanks, Lizzie, for putting that together. Do you want to move on to the climate action plan update?
Yes. So, pull up presentation. Can you all see this presentation? Okay, perfect. It's been about 4 months since we did our last CAP implementation quarterly update, and we also thought we'd use this time for Bianca to give an update on her Civic Spark projects to date. So I will introduce the presentation and then immediately hand it back over to Bianca. There we go.
Yeah, I feel like Lizzie probably outlined every single thing that I've done in the proclamation, but there were a couple things that weren't in there. But I'll do a recap of the work that I've been doing for the past almost 11 months, which is a long time. Something that one of the main other projects that I'm working on is to develop a sustainable procurement policy and help with implementation for city staff to purchase more environmentally preferable products and reduce the city's consumption-based emissions. As you well know, I'm working on the development of an electric vehicle action plan. So in addition to working through the goals, as you saw from the last presentation, also been working through some of the action items and been talking to other staff around that. I hosted a Go Carbon Free workshop. That was the workshop Lizzie mentioned around electrification and Carbon Free Albany. And since the course of me being at the city, we've had additional 50 households sign up on Carbon Free Albany. And during the challenge that I ran, we had 25 households sign up to reduce 16 tons of carbon dioxide. I've also been working on developing social equity and inclusion guidelines for staff to use when considering any recommended action to council to kind of evaluate the impacts of that action. I've added information on electrification on the city website, specifically on the sustainability and ADU page. And I'm also managing an intern who's creating an electrification guide that will be accessible through the city site. And I'm really excited about that. We want to make it super kind of user-friendly. And as we kind of mentioned in the last presentation, make it just as accessible as possible for people looking to electrify, both through home appliances, EVs, and more, to kind of get the information they need and take action. So yeah, those are kind of the main points. They don't encapsulate every single thing I've been working on, but that's an outline of the main projects that I've been doing.
Oh, before we do that, any questions for Bianca? Okay. So for the CAP quarterly update, as I mentioned earlier in the announcements, we've been up to a lot of exciting things in sustainability. Recently, we've been working on the electrification website Bianca mentioned. And if it's not clear from this slide, I put the actions that it directly relates to in the CAP in parentheses next to the description. And a lot of actions overlap, so I may have missed some numbers, so just forgive me for that. The next one would be contractor incentives. We've been partnering with Bayren to get the word out about the $1,000 heat pump water heater incentive, and we sent that information along to APRA so that the Albany Landlords Association, the most prominent landlords association in Albany, has access to those incentives as well in case they're interested in doing home energy upgrades. We are actively working on the green building update, as you saw today. And also Bianca mentioned she's working on a very comprehensive new sustainable procurement policy for the city. So those are things that we've been very actively working on the last few months. As far as planning projects go, we're in the process of creating the electric vehicle action plan, which encompasses some of the other actions within the CAP as well, kind of enveloped into it. And we've also started initial research on the urban forestry plan or tree plan, trying to get a sense of exactly what we would need when we really kick off the process, what kind of elements we're looking for, and also still working on finding funding for a planning process. As far as ongoing efforts go, probably missed some. It's funny to try to think of what's ongoing because there's a lot of things that are always ongoing, but we're still trying to increase usership of the Carbon Free Albany platform and encourage individual behavior change through that. Michelle has been working on a soft story retrofit ordinance and all the different elements that would be a part of that. And we're continuously doing climate action and electrification outreach through whatever channels are available to us. So that is a quick update of what we've been working on, and I'll probably pause here in case anyone has any questions. If no questions, I'll move. So we also wanted to quickly bring up, staff has been in a lot of conversations with other staff and other agencies throughout the Bay Area and even throughout California to talk about how, in the context of other crises that are going on right now around us, how can we really make sure that we're creating a more sustainable, equitable, healthy future for all of our community members. And we really tried to weave that into every section of our CAP. If you can see in the bottom here, there's the equity symbol, because we really wanted to make sure we were taking equity and social justice into account so that we're, in pursuing climate action, we're not disproportionately burdening some, and that we're trying to uplift everyone in the process. So I took a quote from the CAP that really resonates with me. And we want to plan to think about these things moving forward when we create future planning projects and when we do outreach. How can we make sure we're reaching everyone and uplifting everyone and raising voices? And we also want to try to create a new normal, because everything going on, it's kind of this pivotal moment where we can think about how actions we take right now can influence what our world looks like in 2 to 3 years. And then when we hit 2030 and we want to meet certain climate action goals, and then when we hit 2045, and what are all those other goals in the process? And again, just with a goal to really create a more sustainable future for all, with that broad definition of what sustainability means, not just necessarily environmental, but also social equity and resilience, just creating a sustainable future. So we hope to, moving forward with CAP implementation, really keep all these themes in mind. Any questions?
Like Jeremiah has a question or a comment. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I looked at those charts very carefully, and nowhere in our goals or anything did I see school zones. You know, still the slowest speed limit in our city is 25. I mean, Solano was still 25 miles per hour. And I think we gotta get the school zone thing. I've been going 10 years now for school zones. And, you know, the Jerry Brown's got the state grant, but we can't give it to us because we don't have school zones in our municipal code. As soon as we do, we got $100,000 every year for our budget to repaint stuff. And we get 10 crossing guards. So I'd like to see school zones somewhere on this. Please and thank you.
Thanks for the comment. Not really sure where that falls, but cities, we got staff here to record that, I guess, so we can get that to the right people. Any other questions, comments? All right, thanks. Oh, Nick. Yes.
Yeah, so I just started looking through, you know, the whole implementation plan again now, and I think we need, you know, we talk about the action and agency partners and everything else. I think we need something also, because I'm beginning to see how critical just time frame and milestones are in our implementation process. Again, this sort of goes back to like the panel change or the panel upgrades, and it's kind of like, well, let's put that off for later, or let's do this. What I really think what would help us a lot is if we had another column that sort of said when are these goals going to be achieved at the very minimum, and then it would be good to break it down into certain milestones a little bit later. But if we can start thinking that, I think that's going to help us a lot. There's a lot of different actions. They're all interconnected. There's a lot of priorities. Some work together. Some need to be in place before others. And I think having some dates associated with you know, certain milestones would be very helpful, at least in that sort of matrix that we keep in mind. You know, the timeline and the time frame and when certain things really need to happen.
Thanks. Any other comments? All right, we can, are there anybody have any ideas for agenda items in the future that you want to see on the agenda? Sounds like we have green building update and an EV action plan update.
We'll need to put the election of a vice chair on the agenda because we're losing Allison.
And Allison was the at-large appointee, right? So, yeah. So do we need to, does someone bring that to City Council for another appointee?
Yeah, the Mattiac notice is going out this week. And then once there are applications, then hopefully there'll be something in, or a council meeting in September.
Okay, I see Jeremiah has raised his hand again. Jeremiah, do you have a question, comment?
Yes, future agenda item. You know, I'm not sure what on these plastic bags and these plastic straws and plastic lids. It seems like I go to Safeway right now and they're giving me plastic bags. I don't know if that's okay to use plastic bags. I thought that was against the law or something. So maybe a future agenda item would be to bring a focus to not use these plastic bags anymore. I don't know why Safeway, I was there earlier today. I got a bunch of Pedialyte to stay hydrated, you know, and they put these plastic bags, and they got to pay for them too. So I thought it was against the law, and they're still serving plastic straws everywhere. They got plastic straws, you know, so talk about climate action. That would be a great future agenda item to put on there to protect our climate, to stay focused on these plastic bags. It seems like everybody forgot. So please stay focused if you could, please and thank you. And great night, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks for participating. Okay. Any other agenda items before we close? All right. Well, thanks for a good discussion tonight. Sorry we went long, but it was a good discussion. And so we will adjourn now, and we'll see you in September.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, thanks everybody, and thank you so much, Bianca.